But before we have our guest from 247 Sports and Bryce Koon in the On Deck Circle, we don't need a break, right? We can go straight to him?
Straight to him.
Straight to him. So, friend of the show, reoccurring guest on the show, Bryce Koon from 247 Sports. We appreciate you coming back on, Bryce. How you doing?
Doing well, man. First off, I figured out how to use the program.
Oh, look at you.
Just hopping in.
You look good with the backdrop. I see the Braves. Look at
Old school Falcons
helmet. Old school Falcons helmet. I did want to shout out because someone knew I was coming on, and they wanted to shout out Jared because Jared obviously played for the Barons. I spent a year working for the Barons.
There you go.
And
So
Birmingham,
wanted to shout
cool
him out.
place.
Wow.
Yeah, no, well, it was the play-by-play guy. He said Jared was a good guy. He was
name?
a really, really good guy.
Tell me it's Kurt.
Kurt Bloom.
There he is.
Kurt.
Yeah, Kurt. There he is.
Yeah.
Tell him I said
he
hello.
wanted me
That's
to
a
say
good dude,
hello.
man.
So he said he enjoyed having you down there in Birmingham. So.
Hey, they have a Jared Mitchell bobblehead.
They
I think
do.
I have it somewhere. I got one somewhere.
Boy, they swing and miss
I
by
need
doing that, huh?
I got the Tim Anderson one up here. I don't
it's
think I
still
could
attached?
find. They were sold out.
I
Attached.
have a Jared Mitchell bobblehead somewhere in my attic, I think, and I'm gonna bring it on the show.
Yeah.
You have one, right?
I do. I have.
You should bring
I
one.
have a few. I should.
You should bring some.
That is a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I forgot I had those, but I do have some. So I actually do that.
Bryce, got a lot to ask. Got a lot to talk about. Obviously, LSU goes plays at home last weekend against Arkansas.
He gets emotional about these things.
Yeah, Arkansas and LSU. Obviously, it doesn't matter what the line is. It's always going to be a tight game. LSU wins by 3. I think it's the third straight or fourth straight game decided by 3 points. Offense looked like second half in particular looked like they're hitting on all cylinders. They look like they're playing really elite football. They feel like they've cleaned up some of the issues they had early in the season. And you flip it to the defensive side. They feel like, okay, you kind of see some progression, but then all of a sudden you start seeing feel like there's some degression in the secondary. I don't know if it's just because, hey, there's some miscommunication or if these guys are just not able to cover the guys that they need to cover, right? Yeah. You being around the program and you being inside the locker room and kind of talking to Brian Kelly and these guys, what is your feel about the fixes they're going to make in the secondary this coming week because they're playing Jackson Dart, an offense that is going to try to expose that?
Yeah, no, I mean, this is going to be, I think, their biggest challenge just from a sense of pushing the ball downfield and being really aggressive. Florida State obviously had better receivers. I mean, we can't doubt that. That's just what they had. But when you get a guy like Lane Kiffin who, like, he understands that his back's against the wall if Ole Miss wants to contend in the SEC West after losing to Alabama last week. So you know they're going to try to air it out. Now, I still think they're going to try to run the ball. But, you know, you mentioned kind of the inside the locker room, Phil. Kelly told us, he said, look, we got a lot of young guys, and he kind of said it with a smirk in the sense of we've got young guys that are trying to do too much.
Yeah.
And, you know, I take it back to the name escapes, but it's Arkansas's tight end, you know, the blown coverage where he just, you know, he's 20 yards past the defender. Something like that. It's, you know, that's something that can't happen. But, you know, well, that was the question was asked, and Kelly just said, he's like, look, he, you know, saw Jefferson roll out, and everyone in that game knew that Jefferson could run the football. They know he's a big guy, and he just became undisciplined. He, you know, got caught looking in the backfield. And he goes, that's just something that happens with young guys. And, you know, I asked him the question of, is that something in his experience? Because he's got 30-plus years of head coaching experience. Does that just take time? Like, are we just going to have to go through the growing pains? Or is there something, you know, that he's seen in his past of head coaching that you can kind of alter and change throughout a season? He mentioned time. He said, look, some of these things that you wish you could just fly through, you can't. But then the second thing is, you have to have guys that are willing to look on tape and say, look, I shouldn't have done that. Right. And I forget who it was. It might have been Zy Alexander.
It was Zy Alexander.
Or Denver. I don't remember. I think it was Zy Alexander. He said that Zy, like, immediately in film, I guess they look at it on Sunday because we talked to him on Monday. So on Sunday, he immediately looked on the film and said, yeah, like, Coach, that's on me. Like, I got caught looking in the backfield. So I think that's a positive thing. The guys understand. You also kind of look back, I mean, the communication. Some guys are kind of, you know, last second switching because they've been playing a lot of zone. And I think that is a result of not having the typical DBU guys, like having those guys that are just better athletes than anyone on the field. So, in zone, you got to be able, if a guy comes across your face and heads to another part of the field, you got to communicate that. And there were a couple times when I went back and watched the game, you could see guys like Andre Sam, guys like Major Burns that are trying to signal, and whether it's Denver, Zy, Deuce Chestnut, they're not aware of it. Their eyes are focused elsewhere.
Let me ask you this. He says young guys, right? Obviously, Denver Harris would be considered a young guy, but Zy Alexander's been playing, right? You talk about Andre Sam, Major Burns. Those guys are veterans. You Deuce Chestnut's a veteran. He came in. He's been playing college football for a while. Some of those younger guys that are talented that may be part of DBU are still not really getting that opportunity and that run. Is it because Brian Kelly's gun shy because of what you just said, the communication? He doesn't feel like they're ready yet, or is it because they're just not good enough?
Great question. And when we talked with Kelly, when you talk to him about playing time, playing young guys, in other instances, we've seen him play guys like, with Weeks, which I'm sure we'll talk about, Deshaun Womack, like in different areas. I have to think, like, with the willingness that he's allowed these guys to play, Perkins last year, it's got to be a situation of where they just don't have the talent. And he's not going to come out and say that in a press conference, hey, we're just not good. That would be a slight to the guys. But, a guy like LaTerrence Welch, who's been around the program,
right,
and to me just hasn't really, taken that step. Javian Tobiano.
That's the other one I was about to ask you about him. I was about to ask you about him.
Yeah. We watch those guys in fall camp, athletic off the charts. But unless there's just something that, because we don't get to watch practice during the season, so we don't really get to see how these guys have progressed since, I guess, it's like middle of August. We haven't really seen it. So, between Yates and Toviano, those guys were working in the nickel at the safety position. They must just not be progressing, because I'm with you. Like guys like Deuce Chestnut, was an all ACC performer 2 years ago. He's played 2 years of college ball. Zy Alexander has played obviously at lower levels, but he's played a lot of college football. And Andre Sam has been playing, I feel like since I was in high school. I mean, he's played like 6 years.
To his defense, I feel like he's probably the best guy in the secondary right now. Like the guy, he's probably played the best in our secondary right now.
Yeah, and you see the upside with Denver Harris. I think it's just part of him maturing.
Yeah.
Like when he makes plays, you're like, that guy, he's a dude. And then he has just some, head scratching plays, and it's just part of him kind of growing up. But yeah, this secondary does concern me, guys, because I think this is going to have to be a game, and I'm sure we'll talk about it. LSU's going to have to score, and the winner's going to have to score a lot of points to be able to win this football game.
I'm glad you're talking about points right now. So as we're getting into what I think is more of the meat of LSU's schedule right here, the season started out, it was pretty basic on offense. They admitted that. You see them start to mix up some bodies in the backfield. You see them start to get some other guys involved on the outside with Chris Hilton and Aaron Anderson a little bit. But for the better part of the last two games, you've basically seen Brian Thomas, obviously, and Malik, those guys take over. Can we expect to see more of the same in this game, you think, or do you think this is where they will start implementing an Aaron Anderson and or a Chris Hilton into these game plans a little bit more to kind of start opening this thing up and making it even more unpredictable, if you will?
Yeah, so I'll answer it first with talking about like the personnel-wise. And Kelly was asked the question of, hey, are there people or are there, necessarily, I don't want to say schemes, but looks that you haven't shown yet that you guys are still planning to show offensively? And he answered yes and no. So he said yes to schemes. Like there's still some things they want to be able to do. And obviously we'll talk about Aaron Anderson, another guy, Chris Hilton, that I think still has the potential to be a big part of this offense. As for personnel, he said that it's just really it. Like unless something drastic changes, they're not willing to burn a red shirt. They need the guys that have played up until this point, the first 4 games of the season, to perform. Like that's what they need. You mentioned, obviously, the wide receiver room, Neighbors, Thomas, like absolutely love that combination. I think the next key, I would even give the nod to Chris Hilton. So go back to the last drive, and once again, I'm trying to remember. I believe it was Neighbors that caught like the long crossing route, the deep post that kind of got him in to the red zone. If you go back and look at that play, what opened up Neighbors and Thomas underneath at times was Chris Hilton streaking down the field.
Yeah, right.
It's really not something that is Kyron Lacey's, kind of his style of play. Aaron Anderson, I think, is more of a gadget type of guy, screen guy, slant guy, a give and go type of guy. So I think that would be the next step. So as teams start to key in on Neighbors and Thomas, and they, the crossing routes, the slants, the deep post, I think it's going to start to open up Chris Hilton running down the seam, and a guy like Mason Taylor, who's obviously still trying to get healthy from that ankle injury against Grambling. I think that Chris Hilton's the next guy. Like, if they get him moving, I don't know how you stop this offense. Because if a defense has to think, we can't let Hilton, who's got some serious track speed, like he's super fast. If we can't let him get behind us, but then you can't allow Neighbors to catch the ball and have nobody around him for 10 yards, because he's going to make at least one or two guys miss and turn that into a big chunk play.
You talked a little bit about, obviously, there's some defensive concerns, but the offense has been pretty much lights out ever since, I guess, first drive against Grambling.
Yeah, ever since people were asking for
that switch had changed at quarterback. But that's where my question isn't going to go exactly there. But my question is this what – should people expect this from Jaden Daniels game in and game out? Because last year you saw the ebbs and flows of his season, where it was the great game against Ole Miss where he threw for 4 touchdowns and accounted for, I think, 6. And then you have 85 yards versus Arkansas. And that was kind of baked into what you got with Jaden Daniels. This year, it's been 300 yards, 300 yards, 300 yards. Like, it's
no improvement, though.
No improvement. Hasn't gotten any better. But what I'm saying is that the new normal is that what should people expect from Jaden Daniels? Or is this he's running into some bad defenses and they have a scheme against it? Or is it, all right, Jaden Daniels is here and he should be seriously considered for Heisman talk and every accolade that he's been awarded so far as 2-time SEC Player of the Week?
Yeah, well, I would push back on the sense that he's been great ever since the Grambling game. I think it was pretty ugly in the first half against Arkansas. So there's a couple drives. I'll say that.
Sure.
Like that would be the one caveat. Now, I don't think Mississippi State's all that good. I know that they went to South Carolina. They opened up the offense more. I think that defense, they're just in a weird transition.
Yeah.
Like it's just a weird transition for them to kind of find an identity. That being said, the biggest step that not a lot of people are talking about with Jaden Daniels is kind of what you alluded to in the fact that, Daniels would have games where he really didn't do a lot. Let's go back to that Arkansas game, and I know it was like 2 degrees.
Right.
It
feels like an outlier, but it was still there.
Yeah, but it's still there, like you said. That being said, like when you look at that game, he never took off. Like in the sense of he never it never clicked. Like he never just said, okay, now let's go, be explosive. In the Arkansas game, you could kind of sense it from some of the folks. And like I said, this is my first year covering the team, but I've watched a lot of LSU last year. You could sense it saying, oh, here we go. Here's the Arkansas game again. Like here's a game where he really doesn't show up and they're going to have to find someone else. Well, he turned it on, like big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Starting with that last drive in the first half. So I think that's the biggest step he's taken. But to kind of answer your question in the sense, like, why not expect it? Like, they have the weapons. And I'll tell you this, they've got a lead running back in Logan Diggs. So it's, right? And we can talk about that. I mean, so he's got all the weapons. And I know fans will be like, oh, gosh, don't say this. But I'll say it anyways because I didn't grow up an LSU fan. That being said, he doesn't – this is an offense that can win a championship. Yeah. Like, if they're consistent, I don't know if there is a better offense in the SEC with the weapons, with the running backs, with Daniels as a playmaker. It's all on the consistency factor, but I think the biggest key for him is having that running back.
100%, right? I think part of that running game, right, because everybody was wondering if they were ever going to get a running game. Like if the running game was only going to be Jaden Daniels, right, or if Logan Diggs or someone was going to step up, and I feel like Logan Diggs has stepped up. But I think part of that, right, is the offensive line starting to play to the capabilities that everybody expected them to be this year, right? I feel like every game they've gotten better and better and better. Now, granted, look, Florida State is the best team LSU, maybe the best team LSU is going to face all year. They very well may be the best team they face all year this year. And so that was a challenge in and of itself. It was the first game of the season. That's very unfortunate. But it seems like every game since then, the offensive line has made some progress and made some progress. Is that the feeling with the coaching staff and with the guys inside of that locker room?
Yeah, I talked to Emory Jones yesterday, and I asked him, I said, is there like a timeline? Because he was a part of this last year, like when you get to a point where all 5 guys are in great communication, they understand each other's play styles, and they are just a cohesive unit. I said, so is there like a timeline? Like last year, when did it click? And, he didn't give you a ton on that, but he did say that Brad Davis, offensive line coach, has really been harping of it's now. And I think Jared mentioned it earlier, like you're really starting to get in some games. Ole Miss, Missouri, which I don't think is going to be a necessarily an easy challenge. The casual fans might look at that and think it is.
Right.
I think this is going to be a tough game for them to go up there. You've got to be playing your best ball. Like you have to be gelling to be able to play that. And so, Emory talked about, and I think I saw a question before I hopped in kind of about the, Zalance Hurd. That experiment, I don't think lived up to what they wanted to necessarily. Like, I don't think he's quite ready. We saw that in the Mississippi State game. So between Emory and Will, bookending the tackles and really what you're getting from the interior, I love what Charles Turner has brought from the center position and just a sense of just the nastiness. Like, defensive linemen get to talk about being nasty up front. Like this offensive line at times, especially when they needed that yardage with Logan Diggs, that offensive line was just, beating down that Arkansas defensive line, which was a good one, like a really, really good defensive line coming into this game. So I think they're trending in the right direction with the offensive line. But like you mentioned, if it's inconsistent in the passing game, it changes the philosophy. And so, Kelly talked about he feels like they're doing a little bit better in pass pro. I think that was kind of the struggle. I feel like they feel confident about themselves running the football and being able to go kind of mano-a-mano. It's going to be that pass pro where I think, teams like Ole Miss that's got some good edge rushers, Alabama down the line, Missouri's got, some talented guys up front that are going to be able to challenge this offensive front.
So speaking of this one guy, look, I know we all remember what we saw from him a couple years ago. We all know the talent that is actually there and the physical tools that he possesses. How healthy do you think he is? And when do you think we'll see him close to what we remember, I guess you can say, for lack of a better word, in Mason Taylor?
Mason Smith.
Mason Smith. Yeah, Mason Smith.
Mason Smith, yeah. So I got into it with some folks on our message boards, which is just a pleasant place to
message
be.
boards are great.
I've been a big message. Hey, listen, I'm right there with you. I've been a big message board guy this year. I'm loving it. I'm all over it this year.
So
get your hands dirty.
This was my take because I'll answer this with another guy first. I think Jordan Jefferson has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Like what he's provided, and he's provided that violence in the middle that you need. And Kelly said they're going to start to line him up at nose and see what they can do. That being said, and I'm sure you guys have played with guys that, have had knee injuries. I had someone tell me that a non-contact ACL injury is not a gruesome injury, which is just not true to me. Like anytime you tear something in your knee as an athlete, it's not necessarily like I get modern medicine is just made strides in that, but there's a massive mental hurdle.
Well, I go to say it's even more of a mental hurdle because now you feel like, or after something like that happens where it's not gruesome, you kind of feel like, man, anything I do, this can happen again. Like you're kind of walking on eggshells.
Yes.
Yeah. And anytime you get your knee, anytime you get something cut into, that's a pretty severe deal, right? Anytime you have to have something cut into and have surgery, like that's a pretty severe thing. So sorry, keep going.
Yeah, and this is no, and that's probably just someone on the message board, just that hasn't left their mother's basement, just talking. Those kind of folks that are fantastic.
I wasn't on there.
Landing on that couch for the last 15.
That's fine. That's fine. But talk about Mason Smith. Like I think they're, he's standing up straight when he is, coming off the line. You can tell. I think also from a physical conditioning standpoint, like and I think it was the second to last drive, not that final one for Arkansas where they didn't score to end the game, but the second to last one. He had his hands on his hips, and you could tell like he's laboring. So I think that there is the mental hurdle, and people don't realize how long it takes these guys to get in shape and to playing SEC competition shape. Like it's just not something you just wake up and flip the switch. Smith's over 300 pounds. You're telling me that there's no mental hurdle when he goes and engages with an offensive lineman of another guy rolling up on that knee? Like that's a real thing. And so, you mentioned when. For me, I think if you could get him a good performance, and I got the schedule here in front of me, they're going to play Ole Miss, Missouri. Auburn doesn't necessarily scare me. This might be kind of slept on. If he has a big game against Army, a team that is going to be cut blocking, and he shows you the mental fortitude to be able to kind of dominate that game, that makes me feel really, really good heading into Tuscaloosa in 2 weeks after that. Because now you're seeing this is a guy that's really starting to hit his groove. And luckily, like I mentioned, you got guys like Jordan Jefferson. Mikkie Wingo's been playing out of his mind. You got other guys in there, the depth they didn't have last year to kind of be able to, make up for Mason Smith. And I think this kid's still an all-world talent. Like, I think he's an all-American type of player. But people have just overestimated what it takes back, the recovery process of an ACL injury.
And just so you can, I 100% agree when it comes to – I don't think people understand there's a difference between – being in shape in the offseason and then getting into practice shape. And then once you're in the practice shape, there's also another level of being in game shape and being able to do it for 4 quarters. And it's different, man. And sometimes it takes you a little bit of time to actually get in there and do it. Exactly. 100%. It takes you a little time to actually get in there and do it. And sometimes that doesn't come back in 1 to 2 or 3 games. It may take you a month to a month and a half to actually get to that spot.
Yeah. Because if you go back and look at his involvement in fall camp, he wasn't 100%, practicing all the time. So while those guys were ramping up for Florida State, they were kind of full bore. To me, he was kind of still like in the month of July. So to me, he's a month behind. I'll put it like that. Like you talk about, once again, I'm a baseball guy. I'll go back to the baseball sense. You talk about like pitchers, if they miss spring training. Yeah. Well, now they're trying to rehab. They're trying to get back. And when the team's playing in May, well, they're still kind of in that early April, stage of kind of the mental preparedness of that. So I think that he's kind of still in that fall camp mode of really trying to ramp up his reps, his conditioning and stuff like that. Now, like I said, once again, they're not going to come out and say that, but I think that he can still be I had someone respond, say, there's 8 games left of the season. He's obviously not going to factor in any of them. And I said, well, I think you just contradicted your own statement there by saying that there's 8 games left of the season.
We're just going to forget about 2/3 of the season. Okay, I got it.
The defense rest.
Yeah, that's fine.
Those don't count. Okay, I got it.
Bryce, look, I appreciate it. I just have a couple more questions for you. Obviously,
you good, brother.
we're on the defensive side of the football. I want to stay on the defense side. We talked about the secondary. You talked about Mason Smith. But there's some other guys that have started to emerge as bona fide stars on this defense. Mm-hmm. And I think Whit Weeks is one of those guys. I think Deshaun Womack has shown you that the ability that he has to get to quarterback. And obviously he may not be completely ready, right? Similar to Harold Perkins last year. But I think that there is a space for him to be on the field more often than he has been. Yeah. I think that's probably – trending in that direction. Talk about how important the emergence of Whit Weeks has been, especially with Spates being out. I feel like Spates got Wally pipped, to be honest with you. And how important it is to have another guy like Deshaun Womack coming off the edge and giving pressure on the quarterback and not just relying on Harold Perkins.
Yeah, so I'll start with Weeks. We had the chance to talk to him, and that is, as a guy from the state of Georgia, that's a guy that's like, he's just a good old country boy. He was smiling ear to ear the entire time we were interviewing. He's like, man, it's just LSU. And I'm just pumped to be here. He goes, it was the greatest night of my life, playing. And those are the kind of guys you'd like. That's, I think as a coach, that's what you'd like to see, kids realizing their dream. But Omar wasn't bad. I think that it's really easy for fans to say, well, because Whit Weeks is playing so well, that meant Omar must have been bad. No, like what you said, he just kind of got Wally pipped. He was hurt, and Weeks came in against a Mississippi State team that I don't think was fantastic, but then he showed his value. The kid can fly around. Yeah. He is a heat-seeking missile. He's just one of those guys, he loves contact. And I think, too, and he mentioned this, the emergence of Greg Penn as this guy that was kind of a forgotten guy coming into the season. They were going to have Perkins and Spates back there, and that's what we talked about. All off season, all in fall camp. These are your 2 inside linebackers. And Greg Penn just kind of said, okay, well, I'm going to keep working hard, and I'm going to show you that I'm the most dependable guy. And so having a guy like him there alongside Weeks, it's made this defense more explosive. It's moved Perkins into some roles. And now when we talk about Womack, I like Ovie Ogofu. I like Braden Swinson. I think that they bring their own brand into this defense.
Swinson's actually played pretty good. He's been playing.
He has. The big but is Womack's just kind of got that it factor. Yeah. And when obviously, look, everyone talked about, his celebration on Saturday night. But you just kind of see the fire and passion he plays with. Yeah. That's scary. And you start talking about, as an offensive coordinator and opposing offensive line coach, if they've got Weeks and Penn in the middle, and that's a solid combination, you've got Perkins on one side, Womack on the other on, let's say, a 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, whatever you want to call it. that's not a situation I want to be in. Like Ole Miss has been really, really not good on third downs. I think they're like 37 or something like that % after a bad showing against Alabama. That's a situation they don't want to get in because these guys are going to be able to pin their ears back and go get the quarterback.
Right.
No doubt. Speaking of quarterback, look, this is my last question. I'll let you go. I want to get to the Ole Miss game, right? LSU plays at Ole Miss on the road, right? Ole Miss came to LSU last year as a top 10 team. LSU embarrassed them, right? They ran them off the field and
got down early.
Jackson Dart did not look great. I think LSU kind of figured out their way. Lane Kiffin comes in the post-game interview and says, well, 40, Harold Perkins, we didn't know they had him, right? Obviously, he was the biggest difference in the game. What is LSU's recipe to stopping Ole Miss and having a repeat of last year's game, right? And obviously, he knows Harold Perkins. He knows they're preparing, but we've seen some other guys kind of emerge as hey, they may not really have a lot of film on them. Maybe there's another guy like that. What does LSU need to do to be able to keep them at bay and be able to kind of run away with this game?
Yeah, so I got this right here. One, throw for 300 yards or more. The last two opponents, Jalen Milroe, who I don't think is nearly as good as Jaden Daniels, has been able to have success. You go back to Georgia Tech the week before, Haynes King, former A&M quarterback, had a lot of success. And even though that game at the end looked like a blowout, that was a 24-17 game in the fourth quarter, and Ole Miss was up at that time. That being said, I think that one thing LSU's been really good at is getting teams into third and long situations. Now, the thing they haven't been able to be good at is getting them off the field. So with Ole Miss struggling so much against this, something's going to have to give. Like if Ole Miss repeatedly puts themselves in third and long, but LSU's not good at getting off the field, it's going to tell us that those two things are going to come to a head. So if LSU can be more effective in that sense, I think it comes from the defensive front, like we've talked about. They're going to utilize Weeks as kind of a spy, as a guy that's going to be able to get after the quarterback. Dart is a mobile guy. He's not Jaden by any means, but I mean he can move around. I think that this defense draws the challenge of saying, look, this week we've got to keep them under. Let's see, the defense got to keep them under 40%. Like if that's one of kind of my numbers to watch because. When Ole Miss, here is a good stat. When Ole Miss is over 44% on third down conversions, they are 13-1 in their last 14 games.
Well, they keep
that
high speed offense.
Yeah,
they keep it really quick.
And they don't let you get off the field. Yeah. They don't let you sub off. It's one of those things that everything we've talked about, the depth. If you don't get off the field, your depth's going to be tested. So then you're going to be relying on guys that are with high snap counts late in the ball game on the road, which I don't think LSU wants to be in this situation.
All right, last question. Again.
One more.
Last.
Prediction.
That's good. You're good.
Prediction. LSU, Ole Miss prediction. The line's 2.5. What do you got?
66.5 is
2.5.
66.5 is the over.
66.5. Okay, I'm taking the over.
Okay. Love that.
I am taking the over because I do think both teams are going to score. Like I think that LSU does have a good defense. I just struggle to bet against Lane Kiffin because I don't see him having a bad game or orchestrating a bad game back-to-back weeks. Ole Miss scored 10 points last week. I don't feel like they scored 10 points since before Kiffin got there. Like it's just kind of crazy. So I'm taking the over on that. The 2.5-point spread is tricky to me. I do have LSU covering it. I think LSU wins this football game. We did a podcast over Go 247 the other day, and I think my prediction was like LSU 41, Ole Miss 31. Like I think this is a game where teams are going to put up some points, but I think that the Tigers are able to get a big win on the road. I do think they can win this game. But I will say this: everything that we've talked about, there is a path for Ole Miss to win this game.
No doubt.
I'm not saying that with 110% confidence. Like this is truly a game that one team is going to leave feeling really, really good about themselves, and the other one's going to have a pretty deep hole to climb out of.
No doubt.
So you're saying that a 41-31 two-possession drubbing is what you're expecting. Okay, got it.
Two-possession drubbing. Yeah. Go ahead and lock it in.
Hey, same game parlay. I already got it. It's your fault if we don't do it.
Got it.
Bryce, dude, I appreciate you as always. We'd love to have you on every week. If you want to come on every week, we'll talk to you again next week.
Awesome, guys. Appreciate it as well, and enjoy the rest of your show.
Dude, appreciate you.